Hey everyone, today I wanted to talk about the new pillars of IT and how to avoid turning them into silos. But first, to understand the new pillars, we need to talk about the old pillars. When I started working in IT a little over 20 years ago, the pillars of IT were pretty well defined. You had your networking team, your server team, your storage team, and your security team. The teams were a natural consequence of the technology and hardware, as well as the need for specialization. To properly run a storage array or manage the complex network, the individuals making up each team needed to be experts in their field. And the technology was complex enough that it was difficult to be an expert in more than one area. Specialization was a necessary prerequisite to success. But that specialization also led to silos that impeded communication and collaboration. Each specialization was a fiefdom unto itself. And in the more toxic environments, each team was in competition with the others for resources, budget, and headcount. Each group started to feel that only they possessed the arcane knowledge to keep the business running. They overestimated the complexity of their systems while undervaluing the contributions of other teams and failing to see the bigger picture. The bigger picture was the needs of the business at large and not just the needs of the individual teams. Of course, that wasn't the case in every organization. Smaller shops couldn't afford the silos and specialization that came with large organizations. Individuals had to be generalists, and they had to be able to work across the pillars of IT. And at some large organizations, they found a way to break down those silos and improve collaboration. The larger organizations who couldn't find a path to success began to stumble and be outpaced by newer entrants to the field who hadn't calcified into a dysfunctional mode of operation. The landscape of IT began to shift, and the old pillars began to crumble. The first major disruption to the pillars of IT was virtualization. Virtualization allowed for the consolidation of workloads onto fewer physical servers. By necessity, virtualization admins had to have a working knowledge of the underlying hardware, the operating systems, the storage arrays, the networking, and even the applications running on top of the virtualization layer. As someone who worked as a virtualization admin for many years, I can tell you that the storage and networking teams were not super happy about this. At the same time, the technology behind each pillar was becoming commoditized and simplified. Storage arrays were offered with simple web interfaces. Networking products were standardized and abstracted. And even the server hardware was becoming more and more standardized and easier to deploy. The need for deep specialization in every pillar was diminishing. Then the cloud and software as a service came along and blew up the pillars entirely. The cloud was a new paradigm that required a new way of thinking about IT. The cloud was not just a set of services, it was a new operational model, one that favored the generalist. Large organizations began to recognize the inefficiencies of the siloed construct, and out of necessity, the DevOps movement was born to place an emphasis on communication and collaboration across teams. The collapse of silos in IT was accompanied by a new focus on placing IT operations and application development folks on the same team. Soon we began to incorporate security into the mix, and thus we had DevSecOps. These trends of commoditization and standards, cloud and SaaS, and DevOps have led to new pillars of IT. These pillars are not technology specific, but rather they're focused on the needs of the business. The new pillars, as I see them, are operations, security, finance, and growth. The operations pillar is focused on the day-to-day running of the technology that powers businesses. This includes deployments, monitoring, troubleshooting, and maintenance. The operations pillar is the most visible to the business because it's the one that keeps the lights on. The operations pillar includes not only traditional IT operations folks, but also stakeholders throughout the business. They're the ones who help set SLOs, SLAs, and KPIs. They're the ones who help define the business requirements for the technology. Enterprise architects help mediate between what the stakeholders want and what is possible with the technology and operation teams. Given the prevalence of breaches and ransomware, I don't think I need to sell you on the idea of security being a pillar of IT. But there's also a concern that security becomes a blocker for the business in achieving goals, and that if you make security everyone's responsibility, then it becomes no one's responsibility. In regards to the first concern, your security experts should be working with operations and development teams to create a security posture that is both effective and achievable. Security is also about assessing risk and deciding on the trade-offs between risk and reward. The security team helps set the standards that are enforced by the operations and development teams, which addresses the second concern, that no one will be responsible for security. Each team is responsible for the security of their applications and systems, and the security team is responsible for setting the standards and ensuring that they are being followed. Shared responsibility and well-defined roles are key to an effective security pillar. Believe it or not, the cloud costs money, and so does on-premises infrastructure. The finance pillar is responsible for ensuring that the business is getting the most value for its money. This includes budgeting, forecasting, and cost optimization. The cloud has forced the finance group into dealing with more operational expenses and cost uncertainty. Is the cloud bill from this month going to spike 150% because someone in ops spun up a bunch of GPU instances? How is the traditional finance department going to account for that? Well, the answer is they aren't. The finance department needs to be involved in the technology decisions, and it's up to the enterprise architects to help them understand the pricing model of technology services, especially cloud services. There's a danger here that finance, like security, will also become the department of no, which is why it's important that operations and application development teams still have room to experiment and innovate, but to do so without breaking the bank. Often the issue is not spending per se, it's not being able to link spending back to business value, and not being able to forecast spending. Finance likes predictability. Application development and operation teams working with finance can help solve both problems. The growth pillar is focused on the future of the business. It's responsible for identifying new opportunities and technologies that can help the business grow. The growth pillar is also responsible for identifying and mitigating risks to the business. Business stakeholders and enterprise architects will lead the charge here in terms of new directions. They will work with the operations and development teams to identify new technologies and opportunities. Development teams need to be free to experiment with new ideas and iterate on them. Operations teams need to be able to support the new technologies and provide feedback on their effectiveness. As you might have noticed, each pillar is not a technology or a team, but rather a function that is shared across the organization. The new pillars of IT are focused on the needs of the business and not the needs of the individual teams. What that means is that the new pillars of IT are not silos. They are not fiefdoms, and they're not in competition with each other. They are all working toward the same goal, which is the success of the business. The new pillars of IT are not silos, but that doesn't mean that silos can't form. Silos are a natural consequence of human nature. There will always be teams and groups within the organization that focus on specific tasks and bring with them a certain amount of deep expertise and tribal knowledge. Those are good things when wielded in service of the company as a whole. The key behind avoiding silos is to promote effective communication and collaboration, while not stunting the growth and freedom of individual teams. Teams need the freedom to experiment and innovate, while also soliciting feedback from other specialty teams, leveraging their expertise. Ideally, there is a golden path of application development and operations that allows for the rapid deployment of new features and services, while also ensuring that the business is not exposed to undue risk. Now, at the same time, you want to avoid being too prescriptive or over-engineering a platform. Design by committee is the antithesis of growth and can ironically also impede operations, finance, and security. Allow individual teams to set their own goals and priorities, but make sure that they are aligned with the goals of the business. Think of it as an autobahn and not a roller coaster. You're not locked into a track. Instead, there are lanes and generally accepted rules, but you can still go fast. None of this is easy to do. It requires a lot of trust and communication. But I think if we want to move beyond silos and into the future of IT, we need to embrace the new pillars of IT. At least, those are my thoughts. What do you think? If you'd like to continue the conversation, I can be found on LinkedIn or leave a comment down below. Thanks for watching. Stay healthy, stay safe out there. Bye for now.